you have anything before I ask the council?
Your Honor, I do not.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any follow-ups from the last meeting that anybody wanted to discuss? Anything that stood out for them? What's that? It seemed like it was forever ago.
I know, I'm like, what
Yeah.
happened a year ago?
And where were you at? I know. You're like, I don't need to tell you, right? Okay, if there's no meeting follow-ups, we have the Natrona County Collective Health Trust here to talk about some of the work that they're doing. Carter, do you want to tee us up?
You know, Your Honor, members of the council, good evening. Good to see you tonight. We are excited to hear about the efforts that the trust have been engaged in as it relates to facilitating some of the conversation and gathering input and so on pertaining to the issues that our youth have been facing in the community. And so I think they'll have some really good data that will help us understand perhaps a little more what's going on and potentially how we can help. So if I may, Mr.
Absolutely.
Mayor, turn the time over to Ms. Word.
Members of the council, Carter, it's a pleasure to be in front of you. It's a pleasure to see some wonderful faces, and congratulations to those recently newly elected members of the council as well. So it's our pleasure to be here tonight. We could talk to you about lots of different things that we're doing, and then we'd leave sometime tomorrow morning. So I don't think that's what you want from us. We're going to really be focusing on work that we're doing with the youth, and in particular, how it relates to work that you might be doing. There are a number of efforts that are happening across Natrona County right now. And so we wanted to kind of show you a piece of that and maybe have a conversation with you in terms of how it fits into the bigger picture and maybe how it fits into priorities for council as well. So with me are colleagues Leanne Loya and Samantha Smith, and they run the programs of the Natrona Collective Health Trust. So tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about the way that we view our role in the community through the lens of health equity. Talk a little bit about the Youth Mental Health Collective, the feedback that we got from a really interesting youth forum that we held, and then kind of talk about what's next and what our ask to the council is. So just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of the background. There are a number of you who have been a part of things kind of since inception, but I thought we could just really quickly establish who are these people and what are they doing here. So we're a private foundation that has been around since 2020. And in 2020, October of 2020, was when the transaction between Banner Wyoming Medical Center, the county, and Wyoming Medical Center occurred. And at that time, all of the cash and investments of Wyoming Medical Center, as well as a portion of the transaction price, flowed into this newly kind of created foundation. And our charge is with regard to the health and well-being of the residents of Natrona County. And so we are what's called a health conversion foundation. There are over 300 foundations like ours all across the country, and they exist when a health system that is a nonprofit purchases a standalone nonprofit. The funds of that original standalone can't go to enrich anyone, like shareholders or what have you, so they go to enrich the public, and so that's what we are. A health conversion foundation does grants, it does programs, it does policy and advocacy work. We have our policy and advocacy person actually here. Please don't hold it against us that Carter holds it against me.
I do.
Yeah, he does. But Rachel's done a phenomenal job this past year in policy and advocacy work. So off to a really good start in our relationship with the city. Anyway, so since inception, we've done more than $10 million in grants to nonprofits all across Natrona County. We have almost 90 or almost 100 partners, nonprofit partners, who are doing work in this health space. But we're also doing programs too. We're not just issuing checks. We, meaning Leanne and Samantha and Christy Oster in our office, are doing programs. And so NCSJ, the Natrona Council for Safety and Justice, which used to be STEM, is a program that we run. The Youth Mental Health Collective is a program that we run. And we really do have a commitment to transparency, to talking about what we're doing with the funds, the resources, the people that we have. And so you can go on our website anytime, and there's actually a page called Transparency, where you can look at our financials, you can look at our policies, you can look at what Candid says about us. You can also scroll down and look at the learning report, where we tell you exactly what we're doing. And it's 33 pages of really great information and data, why we do what we do, how we do what we do, and what we're doing. And Rachel would take me out after this meeting if I didn't talk about the learning report, because that is a project that she just knocked out of the park. So with that, that kind of level sets the who we are and what we're doing from a broad perspective. But we just wanted to tell you thank you for working with us at NCSJ, at the Youth Mental Health Collective. Many of you who are around the table have been a part of our work. Your city attorney is actually our chair and devotes a lot of time to our work. And we're just really grateful and thank you for everything that you do.
Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and take us into this big picture view here, and then we will slowly zoom in. So big picture here, what we're talking about in the umbrella is health equity. The whole purpose of health equity is that everybody has a fair chance to achieve their full health potential. It doesn't matter about your socioeconomic status. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter where you live here in Natrona County. We want everybody to be able to achieve fair and equal opportunities when it comes to their health and being as healthy as possible here in Natrona County. Something that's important to mention about health equity is it's everybody's role. It doesn't just land in one person's lap or in one entity's job description. It's very much all of us. It takes leaders, it takes elected officials, it takes business owners and nonprofits alike to come together and ensure that this happens in our community.
And so there's a model that the Robert Woods Johnson Foundation and then the University of Wisconsin put together that we really like because it kind of gives a picture for addressing health in a pretty comprehensive way. And you can see that I think a lot of times that people kind of think about health in terms of behaviors that they might individually make or clinical care that they might receive or have access to. But I think that this also demonstrates how social and economic factors and also the physical environment in which we live are just as impactful. And so there are policies, there are programs that the city may be putting on, that the state may have a role in, that really affect a person's health. And so I just wanted to call out some areas really that you as leaders, as the city, really do have an impact on health in our community. And we know you know this, but we want to be able to call it out and say thank you for it. So your work with housing, with transportation, with water quality, with the safety and security of the residents of Natrona County, with the supports that you provide through the rec center, for example, through other programs that you have, the fact that you're such a significant employer here in Natrona County. So things like employment and income, you really do have a leadership role in that. And then you also, through things like the health department, have a role in access to care, in the quality of care. And I know that there are challenges, particularly right now with looking at what are local governments doing with funds and how much funds do they have, and to some extent you're under a great deal of scrutiny, but we wanted to also be able to tell you that in the midst of these kind of challenging rhetoric or challenging actions, we want to tell you thank you, that we recognize the role that you play. The fact that I can go to my kitchen and turn on the water and it's safe water has a tremendous effect on my own personal health, the health of my family. And I just thank you for everything that you guys do on this front. And I think that our work is related to all of these factors. Your work is related to these factors as well. And so what we are now going to talk about is how our work relates to the health and the safety of our youth in Natrona County.
Yes, so one of the ways that this work has been playing out is a group called the Youth Mental Health Collective, led by our wonderful Leanne Loya. Background on this group is this group was founded in response to a lot of the news articles and troubling things that we heard happening with our youth, much like Carter mentioned when he introduced us. This group is comprised of businesses, the school district, local government, nonprofits, concerned citizens, and parents who are all showing up to take part in this work. It was initiated by Annie Dundas, and then the trust took over that about 2 months after that, and I'll walk you guys through that timeline there. So the focus and work that's happening within this group meets once a month. It's the third Tuesday of every month. First thing to come out was let's create a resource guide for youth, and not just our youth, but those that work with youth, that work alongside youth, and also families that have youth at home so that they know what resources already exist. Natrona County has so many. How can we ensure that people have access to those? And then after we make this resource guide list and we write down everything that we have, let's identify some of those gaps and figure out what's missing, how can we fill them? As this work continued, there's this very important piece that has to be included, and you'll see that bullet point is youth voices. With time, we're all sitting here in this room as adults and concerned citizens and parents and business owners, really hoping to come up with some solutions for our youth without the youth. So we went to the youth, asked them some questions, and we will dive into that as well. So to talk about that timeline down there, Broad Group assembled the Youth Mental Health Collective in May of 2024. As it moved into summer of last year, that's as the resource guide, which we have hard copies actually to pass out to you. That's as the resource guide really started to come to fruition, and we've been collecting feedback on that resource guide and figuring out how we can improve it and make sure that it's actually usable in our community and not just a project that's made and then kind of goes nowhere. At following summer and fall, that led us into that decision to really get those youth voices, and we had that youth forum in December of last year. And now we are moving forward to our future work with the Youth Mental Health Collective. And what that looks like is looking at the resource guide release. So after we took this to our youth, there was a lot of feedback about, one of my favorite quotes actually from our kids is, "This looks like something my aunt would bring home from work." So hearing that type of feedback and really trying to make sure, like when we put this in the hands of our youth, that it's usable, right? If we're trying to help them, let's do it so that it's helpful to them. So make sure we can release that guide for them and also work on some website development for that guide. So let's get it on the internet. We learned very much from them that that's going to be the best place for them to access it. Moving forward with the Youth Mental Health Collective, they're going to be working, the group just voted in their last meeting that they want to build upon the plan that the youth have given us. And that's solutions are in your summaries, and we're going to talk more about those solutions tonight as well that those youth have offered. And then another piece is a potential partnership with the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center to really look at Natrona County data and get a mapping of our gaps and hold some focus groups and really talk about some of the stakeholders that work with youth in our community, parents heavily included, to ensure that we can really scientifically map those gaps in order to meet them.
Now we want to jump into the actual youth forum. And the purpose that we gathered all these youth was, one, we wanted to get some feedback on this resource guide, but we also wanted to take that opportunity to really get their opinion on what are some of the challenges you feel like you're facing and what are some of those solutions that you see. We invited our youth to attend this by sending this flyer out to just Youth Mental Health Collective members. So we just emailed it out. And we had asked for their help in getting youth to this event. We asked youth to pre-register for the event, and within 48 hours we were full, which was phenomenal. High demand. I got texts for, it seems like a month after even, trying to get into this. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we learned, but before that, I didn't want to forget, we had 31 participants. I want to give you some of the demographics. Both Kelly Walsh and Natrona County High School were represented. All middle schools in the district were there with the exception of Midwest. We also had homeschool students, online students, and we had one student who's actually no longer attending, so just disengaged with school. Ages spanned 12 to 18, and they were approximately 50-50 middle school, high school, just to give you an idea of who was there. So what we learned, we asked them what their challenges were, and feel free to follow along on your handout. We also have some copies if you want to see a hard copy. But they talked about these things: distrust and disconnection from adults. So some of the things that they shared is that they're really struggling to trust adults. And on the flip side, they also feel like adults are struggling to trust them as well. This was reported in all aspects of their lives. So it includes parents, schools, teachers, out in the community. They even talked about this distrust and this like unsteady relationship happening in activities outside of school as well, not just within the school. They reported that their concerns weren't being addressed. So when they talked about bullying or sharing concerns with staff, teachers, adults in general, they felt like there was no action being taken on those reports. One student shared that when they were reporting bullying and harassment to a staff member, they were told that they needed to do that off school grounds. If concerns were reported about teachers or staff, that was also met with inaction. Of course, their perception of whether or not any action had been taking place. They also reported things like unfit foster parents and practices, lack of family connection. They also talked about parents overstepping boundaries and there being a delay in legal intervention. So they used the words parents taking it too far before there's some sort of intervention. And then they talked about law enforcement maybe not handling situations well. They talked about judgment, bullying, peer pressure, safety, mental and emotional well-being. All of those things kind of came around this theme of judgment, feeling judged about certain things. Teachers, staff judging clothing came up a lot, being judged for previous mistakes, even if they felt they had changed. People making assumptions about them without really knowing their backstory. Something that was really interesting that came out of our conversation, and this was before, it actually came out when we were talking about the resource guide, is we asked them, where would you go for help? Where would you not go for help? And they almost unanimously said that they would not go to the school for help. And they were fairly aware that the reason they wouldn't go to the school for help is because of the legislation that impacts what staff are required to share with parents. So some of the things said were, I won't go to school for help because they have to tell my parents. So much so that this came out in the resource guide feedback. They said, I want to know which resources are going to call my parents. And it came out in solutions to a funny quote that I thought. They said, get rid of the no snitch policy. Bullying and peer pressure came up. I'm sure that this will be no surprise to you. Things like name calling, singling out others, body shaming, harsh judgment, physical violence. It was interesting. We kind of gathered all of these things because of the concern around violence in our community, especially teen-on-teen violence. This is something that was a little bit lower on their list of concerns. They said, yeah, we feel like we have people who take it too far. It's just going way too far. But it didn't really rise as high on the concern level as other things like this judgment and these relationships that they have with adults. They talked mental emotional well-being. They talked about stigma with mental health, having a lot of anxiety around asking for help. And the cost of mental health came up. Having the resources and knowing where to go, they said it's somewhat limiting because if I can't afford it, it doesn't matter anyway. Gender and sexual identity came up in the way of gender expectations and stereotypes. So lots of comments around a few individuals commenting around like males not being tough enough or not being masculine enough, sexualization of youth. They talked a lot about the school dress code, and they feel like that school dress code is sexist and not enforced on boys, mostly on girls. Challenges around coming out, no safety around sexuality, fear of losing friends over those types of things. And all in all, I feel like that part, there's really this, it's not safe to express who you are or who you love without fear of safety. And then last but not least, they talked a lot about a lack of safe spaces. So just wanting teen-specific places to hang out. They talked a little bit about those places that do currently exist. If they're there, we're not trusted to be there and we're getting kicked out of those places. So one of the examples they used was the mall. Like, we're getting kicked out of the mall when we go to hang out. Moving on to solutions. So these solutions, these are the things that came up. So when students gave feedback, it was in the form of short statements. So some of the things that they threw out when they talk about solutions are friendship, peace, caring, trust, respect, no judgment, inclusion, education, accountability. And when we look at all those and kind of started pairing them up, these are the themes that really came out of that. And I'm sure you see the connection between those and their challenges. Three very tangible things that came out, real clear cut. They talked about wanting adults to lock up lethal means, that they have a deep concern about their friends who might be depressed or suicidal and having access to lethal means. And so, what can we do to do that? They talked about wanting adults in their lives to be trauma-informed trained. And they feel like if they were more trauma-informed trained, then they might have a better idea of how to respond to them and how to interact with them. And then they also talked a lot, as a matter of fact, by far, the one thing that came up the most when we talked about solutions was third spaces. So wanting a place to be able to go outside of home or school where they can gather with friends, they can engage in activities without being restricted or kicked out of those places. So when I think about all of these different themes, I feel like there's certain things that really rise to the top for me that I felt like I heard when I was in that space. And empathy is one of them, right? Like, I want you to see me, really see me, and I want you to hear me and what my life is like. I want some acceptance. I want to be taken for who I am. And I'd like you to suspend your judgment of what you see, right? Give me a chance here. Safety, and a lot of that around emotional safety and protect me from harm, and then also take accountability for wrongs that maybe have been done against me. And then community, I feel like that also came up as well. So I want a place where I can be, I'm free to be myself, and maybe have these mutual respectful relationships with adults in my community. So I think of these things as like big, broad, multifaceted. Where do you even begin to change some of those things? It almost can feel like too much. But I feel like we could really make a difference if we focused on one thing. And I feel like that one thing that we could focus on is just trying to build a better sense of belonging for our kids. The Othering and Belonging Institute talks about belonging as not just being seen or feeling included, but also it entails having a voice and a sense of agency. So thinking about how we can co-create and give people the power to co-create the structures that are helping shape our community. So I want to talk to you about some of these examples, but would love for you to think about things like, how can we work together to co-create with our youth? Like, how might we bring youth voice to the table? How might we involve them in our processes? How do we co-create third spaces? How do we give them that third space that we want, but create it with them in the room so that we get it right and they actually use it? So these things are some really amazing examples, I think inspiration examples of what other cities across the country are doing to bring youth in, empower them with a sense of belonging and giving them sort of that agency and that voice. So the first one you see with all of these pictures, this is a Montana project. So a group of organizations got together and their goal was, we really want to improve belonging for all youth in Montana. And they started, when they started this process, they built out these personas. And you can see there's a variety of different kids. They're trying to capture all the different types of personas that they see in Montana. And then they developed a snapshot of their experience. So showing kind of how they live and what that trajectory looked like, milestones, what kind of got in the way. They looked at things like what was this particular individual's aspirations, struggles, feelings, and then they mapped out that experience. They used these personas to then identify gaps in support. They also looked at what are drivers of disconnection. So what is pulling our youth away from being engaged with us, being engaged with our community, and then also looked at ways that they can advocate with youth to build better belonging. The one on the left is called Action Mapping Project. This is something that's being done by a professor at the University of Washington, Tacoma, by a man named Matt Kelly. So Matt does this really cool thing where he partners with school districts, the city, and then also the university. He goes into the schools and he asks kids questions like, where do you hang out? What do you do there? How do you get there? What's your route for getting there? What routes do you avoid? And then he develops these maps. He calls it psychographic data, where the map indicates not only the routes they take, but it shows, he's got in really great obvious colors, like the places they're hanging out and the places they're avoiding. And he then gives that information over to the city. He works with the city to then talk about how might we restructure our parks and recs department to kind of fit the needs of where our youth are already at or why they avoid places. So one of his big things is, how do we redesign parks to meet the needs of our youth? And they're talking about things like Ninja Warrior, I don't know, all the things they're exploring, but cool partnership. Some of the other things that I've come across are the San Antonio Youth Commission, very similar to the Youth Council that you all have. It is a companion to the City Council. It informs policy and practice. They developed and disseminated a teen mental health survey. And those findings from that survey helped them attain a $10 million public investment for mental health resources for youth. And then they caught so much activity and excitement about that it started to attract additional funds and funders. So that also then led to an additional $20 million grant for youth work in San Antonio. And then last but not least, New Orleans is also worked on a full youth master plan. It's this whole strategic plan. It's quite impressive. Comprehensive strategy where they got young people, families, system leaders, all the peoples, right? All the peoples in a room. And their aim was to create a city that supports and facilitates the well-being of youth. And that was youth-led and co-created with community members. They came up with 30 solutions to address barriers to youth well-being, and it's like in action and being implemented today.
So really what we're here is to not just tell you, this is what we're hearing from youth in a way that I think really paints an interesting picture, but also to make a couple of requests. And the first is we think that creating a communication loop that really ensures and even embeds youth voices into the work of the city is really important. To make sure that youth voices are heard and directly connected to your work. And we know that you've done this, there are lots of examples in the past of what you've done. I think Leanne has some really great models that you might want to take a look at. You have also resources like the Youth Empowerment Council that are just there. They're incredible. They operate according to best practices. And we acknowledge that embedding youth voice, not just hearing from the youth, a couple times a year, but embedding youth voices, it can be really complicated and even messy because youth by definition, like they're aging out, right? And who you have one semester, you might not have the next semester, right? We get that. But this is something that we have built expertise in and can help in building this model with you. How do you want to use youth voice? How would you want to embed youth voice in the work of the city? We acknowledge that there are lots of different things happening, again, in this space right now. And One place where we think that there's some more work that needs done across all of the different groups and collaboratives and collectives and task forces is having youth voice. And that's something that we think is something that isn't just like a token, let's get some youth in to represent. It really is, they'll help build something that actually does a better job in solving problems and creating impact than if we don't have youth voice. And then the second thing that we would want to ask you to join us with is in this idea of improving third spaces. I think usually when we start off and we're planning, whether it's a park or a center or what have you, we have this concept that people can come and everybody is welcome, and it's a wonderful concept. But sometimes in terms of practice, that gets chipped away. And we say you can only come at these times, and you can't come today because we've got this really family-friendly event or this fair that's going on where it's an economic driver, and so not today. And things get chipped away in a way that then creates problems in the end, because like the mall, we're forcing them out. Well, where are they going? And so is there a better way to reimagine what third spaces could look like? So they're not even going there, or maybe there's a place there, who knows? But we're asking you to help us in reimagining third spaces in the city of Casper. Third spaces are really something that the Health Trust is interested in putting more resources toward. And so we're researching right now how best to do that, and we'd love for the city to join us in that. But in budgeting, can you think about where the priorities are for the health and safety of our youth? And are they going to be involved in those budget talks? Are thinking about third spaces, how does that come into it? But really, I think that we all have the same goal, and that is youth safety, youth agency, ownership, a strong sense of belonging, of health and of safety in our community. And we think that we're on the same page with this and can work with you on that. So with that.
Questions for Beth or Sam or Leanne? Michael.
So, yeah, thank you all for being here so much. And I just want to say Leanne is doing a fabulous job of the collective. I'm really impressed with how that's going. But just a couple of things about I guess one thing just that I'm hope we're all mindful of is just kind of how we assess the impact that we have on this in terms of, we've had, a number of tragic events, and is it just fewer of those, or how do we go about assessing all the work we're doing is making an impact? And which kind of, I think, leads to your point about youth voice, and it does get messy, but I think, I guess my thoughts and my experience with it, that it kind of like, it's kind of everything you've done in terms of that youth forum. I was very unhappy and very sad to see the youth risk behavior survey go away. I just thought that was another way to get their voice heard about the things, their current situation. And it was, it could be real-time data in terms of what issues are they facing, what concerns them, and then it gives information to us to take action. But so that is kind of, I think the last part of that is then that how do kids get connected to that? And I think that's what you've been talking about is, how do kids get connected? And I'm thinking in particular of those kids who either are economically disadvantaged, or they're facing family issues where there's not necessarily an advocate who's going to make sure they get to the mental health services and support that they need. They're facing roadblocks at school. They're not connected to a community that is looking out for them, that they can turn to for support. So I don't have a solution for that, but again, I think that's a challenge, and I think it sounds like it's something that is certainly on your radar.
Did you answer any of those?
Yeah, I didn't put any of that in the form of a question.
Yeah, for a question.
I wanted to get it all out.
Thank you, Michael. Go ahead, guys.
I mean, I think all of those things are definitely on our radar.
Yeah.
One of the hopes for sure in partnering with YSAC, if that happens, is having someone like that to come in and do a deep dive. They would take a look at all of our juvenile justice data. We know that attendance can be an indicator that things aren't going well, right? So how do we partner with the school district to figure out, are there intervention points where we can intervene and maybe make a difference? Don't have all the answers.
Yeah,
yet.
no, and I don't know that any of that needed an answer. It's just kind of what I was thinking
And we should
All
note
great
too, that
thoughts.
the school district, they are very aware of the feedback. Leanne went to them with all of the feedback from the forum. They've been very involved in the Youth Mental Health Collective. We've got a great relationship in starting to get data from them. So they're a partner with us in this too.
Amber.
Thanks. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to add a comment. In a former life, when I was a little bit more youthful than I am today, I spent some time, several years actually, building a group with some other folks to try to answer the question of youth outmigration and why do we see young people leaving. They don't develop those connections, the roots, the type of roots that we'd like them to have, and a connection to their community. So we end up losing a lot of young folks to other places. And you know, that question is a question that I've heard rolling around since I was 12 probably. And my experience in that work, we were working very diligently with many, at least state level agencies to try to get a youth seat at whatever table we could get a youth seat at, really just really trying to say like, hey, like we can help you answer this question. We think we have the answer. And we think we could give you that information, and we've got some ideas, and you know, that was a long, painful, slow process. I will tell you that it was, while there was interest, generally speaking, like people thought it was cool, that we didn't run into a lot of meaningful connections, action. You know, there were pockets of it here and there where we felt like, hey, like maybe that's something. But, you know, looking back on it, I would struggle to say after, you know, 25 young people working across the state for 4 years, like, did it go anywhere? Not really. And so I think that there has been and is a real desire to participate. There is contribution to be made. And I will say, as a younger person trying to sort of punch up and say, like, let me in, like, let me help with this, it's a hard road. And so I think, you know, incumbent upon us to try to open that up from this direction and this seat. So, you know, support your recommendations to think about third spaces. I personally think third spaces are important for people at every age. And so I think you know, support giving more thought to that in what we do. And I think your point about embedding youth voice, it takes a lot of work for all the reasons you said. Like, we don't have an organization anymore, right? Like it's hard, it's really difficult, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be putting in the effort to make it happen. So
Thank you for that. I really would love to, Councilman Pollock, to work with you guys on, you know, passing along some of these models and like the tangibles, like how to do this. And I mean, we're not going anywhere, and we'd love to be that kind of, hey, how can we do this with you if you're interested in our ideas for what embedding could look like on a pragmatic scale.
Jenna.
I just want to say I love it. I have 1,000 visionary ideas, and I'll share them with you later in some time. And so I'm taking notes, and I'll be in contact. I have some good ones.
Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the work that you all are doing, particularly with respect to trying to reach out to the youth and engage their guidance and so on. Did you find that the youth are asking for the opportunity to be embedded? You know, I certainly see spurts of that in my experience, you know, and spurts of it being sort of ambivalent. While I think it makes total sense and is good and appropriate, and we should be thinking about embedding their voice in our work. I've found that it often comes better at the heels of a request to do so.
Absolutely. So actually, after we had this event, we did this kind of in partnership with Mercer. We did it at Mercer, and Happy told us recently the meeting right after this youth forum, their membership doubled. So I think, and I continued to get calls and requests after this event even happened from people saying, I know of a youth who might want to share their story with you. I think there is a desire to be involved, to be heard, and to get involved some way, somehow. I don't think that they always know what that looks like because it hasn't existed before, and probably need, you know, a great leader to kind of pull them along and direct and guide them, you know, through that whole process. But I absolutely think it is there. There was a lot of
We can bring
energy in that room.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, on that point, glad to hear you've met some of those people.
Yeah.
Please be generous in handing out my contact information
Awesome.
because I used to serve as our liaison to Casper Youth Council. Unfortunately, that organization is sort of dissolved, but it really was only able to exist on the back of Elisa, you know, who was spending dozens of hours a week probably working that program. And that's been my short experiences. Unless you have champions that are willing to exhaust themselves, you know, to make it happen, it's really hard. But absolutely, I would love to have a younger person on council. I think I'm the youngest person, and my 20-year reunion's coming up in 2 years, and so
Rude.
huge disconnect.
This dynamic just
Is
shifted
it-
a
Am
little.
I am I incorrect in that?
Sorry.
What year were you born?
Sorry, Matt.
We're not going anywhere and we're impossible to exhaust. So we're happy to help with this as
Yeah,
well.
if you have, I know we're kind of talking about creating a structure or a format or a platform for youth to be able to better get involved, but I love playing matchmaker. If you have anyone that genuinely wants to get involved in anything, you know, I'll chat with them about what their interests are, what their skills are. Would love to get them hooked up. There's always board openings and opportunities to serve and stuff, so please feel free to use my contact information.
Great, thank you.
I just had a couple things. One is thank you. I love youth. It's like my passion, as you guys probably know. A couple questions that history repeats itself. Michael, how many resource guides have we done in the community? Do you think?
At least 4 or 5 of my time.
Yeah. And so one of my questions is, how do you guys see the usage of that resource guide in the community? Because I know we've had, you probably know this as well.
So I think there's a couple of different things, right? I'm sure you won't be surprised that when we put that in front of you, the biggest piece of feedback we got was like, I'm never going to use that, right? Which I feel like if you've worked with youth, you kind of knew going into the creation of this that was the case. But they did say, like, if there was some, you know, some great graphics and some pictures and an easy to navigate website, like if we could get this digital, then we might be more likely to use it, right? So we are working with health department to develop a website for this, and also working with 211 to make sure that they have all of those resources. They've actually already done a cross-reference. We've talked about like pushing the paper copy out, but I'll be honest, somewhat hesitant about what's the right timing for that, because as you know, those things change so frequently too. Like, I want to be able to put a little thing for the most up-to-date information. Make sure you go to this website to ensure all the contacts are correct. So that's kind of where we're at now. As we learn what the health department and 211 kind of what their capabilities are as far as design go, then we're hoping that expands to an app. Like, we're just kind of taking it one step at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's great.
Yeah.
The only other follow-up I had is one of the things that I really like, and Kyle knows this because he was the CYC liaison and I'm YAC liaison here for the city. At one point, YAC used to actually be the arm of the city, right? And so it was funded pretty wholly through the city, funded through the city or through the school district. city council members and school board members sat on the Youth Empowerment Council alongside the youth. They had teachers that were a part of that Youth Empowerment Council. It was pretty robust at one point, and when I was the coordinator at that time too. So we were doing that in the schools. We were in the schools. We were doing that stuff. That's kind of got lost. And I'm not sure, maybe you guys can be able to create that again. And maybe the city can play a part in trying to reestablish how do we move forward with getting young people embedded within government. And the other side of it too, the Youth Empowerment Council actually used to go to the state legislature on a regular basis when Darcy
Dixon.
Darcy Dixon was the YC coordinator, and they would actually craft legislative bills and take them to the state legislature in regard to that. So those are the types of things, if we could go back 20 years to when Barb Ray started the Youth Empowerment Council, that, I mean, I think is where we need to, so that whole thing of history repeats itself. I think we need to get back there and we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Institutional knowledge right here.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Can I?
Oh, sorry, Patrick.
Oh, yeah, right. So,
We forgot about you. Sorry.
So-
You raised your hand. Sorry, Pat.
well, I did raise my hand. So anyway, Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Pat.
Beth and your team, I am so thankful for your organization and all of your good work in multitudes of areas. My question kind of, I think Ray and Kyle kind of touched on it, but what I'm wondering about, are we better off coordinating with the health trust? Maybe the kids don't trust the city. And so is the trust a better way to head in the conversations I haven't been involved in that Jai has kind of suggested? Is this kind of all encompassing in anybody's mind, or should we work through the trust or collaborate somehow to make it better for the youth? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Sweeney. I do think that this is kind of the start, and it can look like lots of different things. And I think that I have kind of a sense of where there's interest, and we can work with those on council to build something together if there's an interest there. I think that for us, the important thing would be to actually embed youth and youth themselves and build that sense of belonging and that voice, and then use their expertise. They have expertise, as Leanne alluded to, in terms of where they're going, not going, where they're safe, where they don't feel safe, where there can be some changes. And I think I'm really highlighting that when we use their expertise, it makes those solutions that much deeper, I think, is our interest. And so we have, as Leanne indicated, a number of models. I think the important thing is for it to not be just sort of symbolic, but actually have it be meaningful to you. This needs to, the return on your investment needs to be meaningful, right? And that's our interest. Meaningful for the youth, meaningful for you as leaders. So we'll just keep working on it together, if that's okay.
Is the trust involved with Blue Heart? Okay.
Any other questions, thoughts, anything like that? Thank you, guys. We
Thanks all for your
appreciate
time.
it.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll be in touch. I think we'll have, I would like to put this on a work session for us to kind of talk more about kind of direction, then reach out to you guys to collaborate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
There
you.
he is.
Hey, Pat.
Straight from the little America.
That's a little much, isn't it?
On the big screen, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenna.
Like the Wizard of Oz,
Yeah.
when you put your face up there like that. All right. you. What's that?
We lost.
Yeah. We'll wait till everybody gets back. Let's want to get started. We have a quorum here if you want to. Just make decisions without them. Okay, let's go on. Go ahead, Carter. Go ahead and start.
No problem, no problem. Actually, I would say that we could probably capture the discussion between the next two items sort of simultaneously with each other. We essentially are coming to the council to give you a heads up about a couple grants that we'd like to pursue. One, of course, is with the Rec Joint Powers Board, and the other being with USTA. Both, of course, for recreational assets that we believe are integral to some of the larger projects that we're trying to follow up on, as well as programming that we're trying to promote. And so if I could turn the time over to Zelima to walk us through those efforts, that would be very helpful.
Evening, Mayor, City Council. So the first grant we wanted to visit with you about is to the Natrona County Rec Joint Powers Board. So I actually have Nick Whips here, our recreation manager. He's going to walk you through that one, and then I'll visit with you a little bit about the USTA grant.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for having us. This one, just to give you an idea of what we are wanting to do and get approval for, is the submittal of a grant to the Natrona County Recreation Joint Powers Board in the amount of $60,000. And that $60,000 will then, if we were to be successful in that grant application, would go toward the gym dividers at the Recreation Center, which right now are 15-year-old gym dividers. They've been on our 5-year capital plans for quite a while right now. And that project in total to get those completely replaced is $123,000. So this grant would basically go to about half of that project, with us then in capital asks this year for 2026, taking the remainder and splitting it between the sports and athletics work group and then the recreation work group, because they both benefit from that capital project. So, not any questions, but that's the crux of what we're asking and potentially submitting that grant for.
Questions about this? Yeah, Kyle.
Thanks, William and Nick, for the information. There's only like 2 or 3 curtains, isn't there?
Yep. And when you're talking about curtains and the mechanical pieces that go into it, and then with the install and everything associated with that, we've actually gone through a few iterations to make sure that price point is correct. We've got a few quotes, and $123,000 would ensure that we have a brand new system that would last us that industry standard 10 years. And right now, to be completely honest with the current curtains, it's been on our capital planning for the past couple of years. We've had risk come out and evaluate those, and there's some concerning pieces to those curtains that right now we're mitigating, but right now it's one of our higher priorities to ensure that we continue to be able to provide multifaceted programming and to make sure that our patrons are safe.
I think you said they're 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They're pretty worn.
Yep.
Imagine.
Yeah.
And a lot of use.
And a lot of use. They come up and down a lot. Other questions for that grant specifically? Looking forward to seeing you guys at that.
I'm gonna make the next meeting.
Go ahead. What's next?
Okay, so the next grant is to the United States Tennis Association. And quite frankly, USTA has been a partner on the Washington Park Revival Project since its inception, since we first started planning a revival project for the park. They've been involved through their hub programming and concept park, or impact parks, initiative. They actually came out and helped us develop one of their first concepts for the north side of Washington Park, which included baseball, pickleball, and tennis. And so we're finally at a point with phase 2 in that we just received proposals for a contractor, design build contractor, to get those tennis courts actually constructed. And so we're at the point in the process now where we need to re-engage USTA go through the formal process of applying for their funds for this project. But again, they've been involved since the very beginning. They've already provided letter of support for other grants that we were applying to make this project happen. And so all indications are that if we go through this formal process, they will continue to support the project and fund it to the highest amount that they possibly can. Historically, that was 50. Indications are that might be more. And so we just want the opportunity to apply for up to $200,000 for that project. The project is fully funded in 2024 capital. And so we were originally only counting on somewhere between 25 and 50,000 from USDA to make this project go fully funded. Anything above 25 to 50 that we are able to get would mean that we could reallocate some of the city cash that we committed as match for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant to other aspects of the project. So that would essentially be gravy for us.
Questions about the tennis grant?
I just, a quick one. So Zulema, this is to those courts where the dirt work is happening there along Achilles. Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure. No,
Anything else? You just need direction from us, Carter. Oh, Pat, I'm so sorry.
No, you're not. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you. So are we part of, I mean, the school district put together a wonderful, enhancement over there on, what is that, Beverly? And that's the school district's project now. So is the public able to access those also?
Mayor, Counselor, yes, those courts are open for public use as long as the school district doesn't have them dedicated to team practices or tournaments of school district teams. So they are absolutely open to public use for free on a first come first served basis, or people can reserve them and pay a small fee.
Then these courts, are these an expansion of what we already have, or a rebuild at Washington Park?
Counselor, these are a reconstruction. So currently the park has 4 tennis courts that are in pretty poor shape. As part of Washington Park Revival Phase 1, 2 of those tennis courts are being converted to pickleball, and 2 of them are being converted to parking, which is really needed in that park. And so these would be brand new construction in that lower part of the park where the sand volleyball pits used to exist, but brand new post-tension tennis courts, and there will be 6 of them.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I may add, Counselor, in response to your question, I would also say, however, that this is a consolidation effort with regard to other courts that we've decommissioned or planning to decommission at least throughout the community, given their poor shape as well. So what you're seeing is really twofold, a replacement effort as well as a consolidation effort.
Pat, do you have any more follow-ups?
So just to be clear, it's 6 new courts.
So it's our public court count at 16, if you factor in the district's 10 and the city's 6. We do have courts at Paradise Valley, but they are not safe or playable at this time. And the courts that used to exist at Huber have been converted to pickleball.
are the ones at PV the ones being decommissioned? Right.
Eventually.
Amber.
Maybe you have this number. I think you've given it to me before, I know, but just to get more detail on what we're talking about, can you remind me of the number that we have or have had historically relative to the number that we will have after constructing these 6?
Yes. So off the top of my head, and I will confirm these facts, but I believe historically the city of Casper had 10 publicly owned tennis courts, because we had the Fort Washington, we had 2 at Huber, we had 2 at PV, and we had 6 at Highland before the school district took over that property. So now we no longer have the Highland courts. Huber have been converted to pickleball. We still have the 4 at Washington, but they're getting repurposed, and the 2 in PV are not playable. So we went from 10 to now we'll have 6 that are city of Casper owned.
Julia, just a quick council Counselor Jensen and I were just talking about, the courts at College Heights, those belong to the college, correct? Correct. All right, yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we need direction to say go ahead from the council, or do you just say this is just informational?
Well, I certainly would say, Mr. Mayor, that it is informational, but your thumbs would certainly help us move
Is
forward.
everybody comfortable with the city moving forward? Zulima, them to go after these grants?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we, this is for both?
Thanks, Zulima.
That was for both?
That was for
grants?
both, sorry, for both grants. Just got a little
Great.
bit there. Save us about 2
You're the mayor,
seconds.
do as well.
You were too.
Change the agenda
Don't
around
sell
for you.
yourself short, you were too.
That's right. And you did a fantastic job when you were.
All right, moving on to the police department, City of Casper liquor license. Do you have anything you want to tee up with this, Carter?
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Mayor, council is aware that every year we are obligated to consider renewals as it relates to your liquor license holders. And as you know, there's a spectrum of liquor license types and uses that you have deployed right now. Everything from your full retail liquor license that enables the full capacity of alcohol operation, all the way to resort and club type licenses, hotel kinds of licenses that fit into that category, restaurant licenses, and bar and grill and so on. The obligation that you have is to consider the information that you hear from the chief today as sort of a determining piece of information leading to your decision to renew or not renew. Generally speaking, council has a track record of renewing most licenses with few exceptions that have occurred over the years. And so, you know, there is that history, albeit rather brief and limited. Nonetheless, the goal for tonight is to inform you as to our history over the past year, our experience with your holders, and give you the opportunity to ask any questions pursuant to the data that is shared with you tonight. So feel free to question our chief. We also have a member of the clerk's team here tonight who can give added color as well. And she's really hopeful she can do that, knowing Carla like I do.
Carl, did you want to come up here too with the chief, or are you good? You're all right. Okay. Go ahead, chief.
Mayor, council, very straightforward message you're going to hear from me today. There's really no drastic changes. For the second year in a row, we are seeing every time a established licensed liquor holder switches from being their traditional service towards a gambling centric one, calls for services tends to climb with that. So for the second year in a row, we see those ones that have added gambling into their offerings at their establishment. We tend to see more calls for service out of that. This year, you're not really seeing any of our establishments that drew the ire of the Casper Police Department. You know, when you look at the sheer numbers, if you were to just take a number by number comparison, Walmart is always going to take the cake because we end up going to Walmart a lot, you know, for things that may or may not have anything to do with their liquor license. Overall, I think it's good news that our average BAC at the time of arrest has gone down in our DUIs. It's more closely approximate to our traditional average of just 2 times the legal limit, rather than that spike that we were seeing in years past. So overall, what you're hearing from me is I have no recommendations for actions on reestablishing these liquor licenses. I think the changes that we put in place over the last few years to have more timely renewal of licenses and more efficient operations are all paying dividends. And so I have no concerns with the way things are going right now.
Any questions related to that? Vince? Kyle? Good to hear.
And thank you, Chief, for the information. I would be curious, because these reports only go back 1 year to 2023, and I know in regards to your comment about gambling in establishments, that predates 2023, and so do we have data that is longer term in its historical trend to be able to, like, I'd love to be able to quantify what that addition of games does, like percentage wise in relation to volume of calls, and to do so would be helpful to have more than a year. Is that something that's available?
So, Mayor, Council, that's a very Kyle question. To ask.
How many
You
years
know
can you
too
give
well.
me?
This is my last council meeting. I just couldn't get out of here without. Counselor, what I would tell you is that you have access to every one of these annual reports if you wanted to go back and see how that looked last year. But let me give you an example. There's a licensed liquor establishment on Blackmore. Last year we saw a significant increase in that because they switched over their services. This year, one of the ones that leaps out at me is a licensed liquor establishment on Poplar. That has traditionally been run by a very straightforward, kind of a tightly run organization. Now all of a sudden it's offering gambling, and it went up significantly. So I'm going from memory, but I'm going to say that the particular one I'm referring to went from 7 to 44, and the only change being a different modality of the services that are offered to the customers of that location.
If I don't follow up.
Yep, you bet.
I appreciate it. I might reach out. Maybe I'll let you off the hook and I'll make Deputy Chief pull those reports for me. I am curious, 50% increase in the past 2 years in public in-talks. We went from like 318 to, that was pretty significant. That one stood out to me. I was hoping you might be able to put that in context if you.
100%. That is a function of our increased number and presence of homelessness in the community. 100%. That is the active efforts of the police department to be responsive to those citizen concerns, especially in the area of the Nicolason, the library. That is the officers responding to those calls for service of in our parking garage. I mean, just everywhere. They tend to not have a lot of tolerance for those public quality of life crimes that are associated with that, and that public intoxication is we generally try to move people along. We try to offer them assistance, get them checked in, but the ones that just refuse to know, this is what that is the tool that is most effective for us. So remember that, just as you heard in weeks past from our municipal tort leaders, that they're acutely aware that those numbers have gone up. And so they've instituted ways to mitigate the expenses associated with those arrests and the incarceration of that many people. But without question, that is straight up reflection of this increased number of street inebriates amongst our homeless population.
Anything else, Kyle? I see you.
I mean, I was just hoping, since this is our last meeting with you, try to get as much out of you as possible. Trying to decide, I totally understand the kind of fiscal conservatism and making sure that our incarceration budget does not kind of spiral out of control. So I understand and appreciate the focus on that and trying to mitigate that best as possible. But also, I wouldn't necessarily want us to be more lenient than we have been. If those arrests are going up relative in proportion to the amount of folks that we have in the community that are committing those crimes. I don't know. I'm just trying to make decide in my head where exactly on that spectrum I feel comfortable with us being. And the reason it's on my mind, I was just having a conversation with a constituent this morning that felt very strongly that we were not doing enough to mitigate the issue of people experiencing homelessness, committing crimes, and I have my own rebuttal against that, but sorry, there's no question in there. I guess it'll be a conversation, I guess, for this council, I guess, when we're putting together the budget for the next year about, do we want to try to find more money to allow us to incarcerate more people if there are more crimes being committed, or do we want to try to take advantage of mental health court and diversion programs and, you know, take another avenue to try to mitigate that as much as possible? Because it's definitely a conversation the community's having for, you know, it's visible to everyone. And so just want to make sure we're coming up with an approach that the community as a whole feels good about. But so yeah, sorry, no question.
I just think Chief had something he wanted to answer
go
anyway.
ahead. I really enjoyed the captive audience. That was cool. Just keep going.
Mayor, council, you know, you're right. This is a community issue. It's something that council will continue to deal with. What you're hearing from me is that the police department's role in this question is pretty clear cut in my mind. Our citizens call and say, hey, there's a problem. So somebody needs to do something with this. And the officers come and they do something with it. From there, it becomes a prosecutorial and a judicial question of efficacy of our offerings. And so we fully support, as a police department, these diversionary efforts and the ability to get people into treatment rather than just languishing and building up fines. But the police department's role is pretty clear cut. You know, crimes are being committed. Citizens are concerned. We respond to it. We address those. Sometimes we find those on our own before a citizen gets called in. But I think the police department has got the tools that they need. They've got the direction that they need. They're making that, they're intervening in that ongoing crime. And where it goes from there, really, it's more of a team effort. It's not just police department. It also includes the courts, prosecutorial discretion. There's a lot of factors that go into this. And there's plenty of opportunity for us to weigh the objective consequences of the offerings that we have to mitigate that. And you have a good team across the board to kind of look for what is in the best interest of our citizens here in the city of Casper.
Jim, I know you're next, but I think Eric wanted to touch onto that. Really
Yeah.
quick. So I'll get you, Jenna.
Mayor, if I might, Councilor Gamrod. So just to echo a little bit of the chief's comments, from the prosecutorial side, I think the PD is going to continue to respond to these calls, and they're going to do on the street what they need to do in terms of making arrests, responding to calls. On our side of the things, I think it's really important to remember that when we're talking about public intoxication, it's not a jailable offense. And so it's a fine-only offense. And the only time we start talking about jail time potentially is when they've accrued so many fines, $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 in fines, and they're not paying them, and they're in contempt of court. And so how can we, ameliorate that? How can we, and the other thing would be is if somebody gets picked up on a Friday night on a public intox charge and they sit there until Monday and then they get arraigned and then they get, so now we're paying for 3 days in jail. So, can we wait till they're at zeros, spring them out of the jail and issue them a summons to come to an arraignment later, so to cut those costs. But in terms of the public response and what our PD is doing on the street, that none of that kind of, I would say, downstream work should change the response.
Jenna.
Well, I was going to say, no, I don't probably remember, but when we were, it's been so many different kind of conversations there, but when Kyle was talking about, I guess it goes back to when the chief was saying the uptick in calls to gaming establishments. I just wanted to say that we sat in, and Kyle, you were there too with me. I think you were in that room during WHAM for the Wyoming Gaming Commission, and the panel did bring light, like they recognized that. Did you remember Mr. Ridgway talking about that they do have a lot of calls to those facilities, but a lot of it too is that they don't want their other customers being harassed, I guess, or talked to and things like that. You know what I mean? Like distracted or become a nuisance. So he said that he did acknowledge that there's a lot of other calls, and I can't remember what other reasons he had. Do you at all? Of why he thought? I don't know. Is that conflict? Sorry. Well, it was a WHAM thing, so I think so.
How candid do you think I can? I mean, it's not the most critical.
Do you just remember the
Mayor and Council,
information
I
from
think
that
to the extent that
topic?
this was a discussion at WAM and it's informational.
What I
From
recall,
that
Mr.
topic?
Ridgway stated that their primary demographic was seniors and women between
Yeah.
35 and 44. So his
And-
argument during his presentation was that they want to be good partners for the police department because they don't want to drive away their core business.
Right,
That's what I recall.
yeah, and so when when calls come in, thank you, I knew you would know, I didn't want to put you on the spot like that, but, do you see that those are the kind of calls that you're getting, or are they just the drunk and out of conduct?
Like senior.
Yeah, not the seniors, it's not grandma getting mad and you're not going on a call for her. You digging a hole, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to defend the gaming establishment.
Council, I know this is a good discussion. It has been my personal observations and my experience that calls for services at those locations, they cover a broad spectrum of things.
Yeah.
It appears from my, from my knowledge of the 7 years that I've been here, that becomes a greater magnet for criminal activity
Yeah.
than it was before. So all I was trying to do is convey to council that as I went through and looked at all of these establishments, the ones that kind of leapt out at me was, man, that establishment used to never get calls for service, and now look at that. And that is the same shock that I had last year when I was preparing last year's report. I was only trying to draw that one, 'cause
Heighten our
the
senses.
net impact of this is I'm supposed to report trends, and that's really the only noticeable trend that I could put my finger on.
That was it. I'm glad that we could try to harass you on your way out.
I got Michael and then I have Pat. Go ahead.
These are two actual questions, okay? So-
Whoa.
I just rambled. No.
Oh, I thought you were talking about other.
No.
I just give us a shot at him. Just kidding. Go ahead, Michael. You're good.
No, so Chief, do you have any observations about the two others that drew my eye were the minor in possession of alcohol, that was up in my mind pretty significantly, and then the alcohol-related incidents. Do you have any observations about factors contributing to those, or things, contributing factors you've become aware of to incidents, types of incidents in particular?
So I think you're talking about data that I provided last week.
Yeah, or just, well, not necessarily, but just kind of in general. But is there anything you can think of that kind of is attributing to that uptick in both those two areas?
I do not want to wax too philosophical, Mayor, Council. Casper Police Department has hired and put on the streets a lot of new officers. New officers are more acutely aware of things like that. They tend to say, hey, I'm gonna go deal with that. And so I think the trends that you're seeing when it comes to juveniles and alcohol is, there's nothing, in my opinion, nothing that has caused me super concerned. We have far more greater trends in vaping and wax and that readily available THC type things. We have far more significant trends in that area than we do in alcohol. I'm not super concerned about changes that we've had in minors being contacted by our police officers. It happens, but it just doesn't happen to the point where it's a societal concern. It's always going to be a concern. I got to choose my words better.
Yeah.
It's always going to be a concern, but the sky's not falling when it comes to that.
Anything about the alcohol-related incidents? I mean, that was up 23% since.
That is driven by this increase in
in
dealing with our street inebriates.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is about you mentioned the 12 businesses that failed the compliance check. And I think I asked this before, but I don't recall the answer. When a business fails the compliance check, is there an automatic recheck within a relative amount of time, or they just wait till next year, or what's that look like?
Mayor, council, I'm going to choose my words very carefully on this. I don't want establishments to assume that there's an automatic one. I don't want them to assume that there might be a recheck. So throughout the year, every establishment gets checked more than one time.
I see. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see, Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, being this is your last council meeting, Chief, I just wanted to thank you for your diligent work on liquor licenses in particular and the policing. I didn't necessarily agree all the time, but I think through your efforts and the department's efforts, definitely we've seen a lot of improvement in my mind, even though these numbers look a little wonky, but do appreciate that. So I think my other question is to the clerk, in that I don't see Old Town as a non-renewal. Old Town Family Fund, could that, I'm missing something?
Maybe we'll have Carla come up. Come on up, Carla.
Mr. Mayor, Council, they are not renewing this year.
But I didn't see that on the list up at the top, so. Is that,
It will be on my memo of non-renewals.
okay. So does that free up, did they get a bar grill license?
Yes.
And do we currently have availability of bar grill licenses if somebody asks?
We have 5 available.
Pardon?
We have 5 available.
Oh, wow, okay. Okay. And is the Rialto and the American obviously hadn't applied, but aren't those both the new style, kind of the venue license where like a golf simulator place can get a one of these new styles if they want, or does that fall under bar grill?
Mr. Mayor, Council, all bar and grills now qualify for food, alcohol, and entertainment. Whichever they choose, whichever combination or just separately that they choose.
Okay.
So and America both have bar and grill licenses issued.
Okay. And we've got how many, including Old Town, would be 5 available?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Mayor. And Pat, kind of to your point, because I just referred someone to this webpage a couple days ago, they were asking about liquor licenses. We do publish that all on the city's website, all the variety of liquor licenses, the current available, current used, the differences between them all. So, I think you just have to Google City of Casper liquor licenses and you should be able to hit that webpage. So just for anyone listening that is interested in learning more, I've always found that webpage to be a great resource.
Any other questions for the chief or for Carla? Can't think of any questions for Carla.
I'm just teasing you. I'm just teasing you.
Chief, before you go, Pat had mentioned this, and I know a couple of others. We want to just take a moment to say thank you. I know this is your last council meeting, but it's been a pleasure and an honor to work with you, and appreciate the effort and the work that you've done to help Casper move along. So we appreciate you. We wish you well. You'll be in our thoughts and prayers. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kyle can email you anytime, right, for questions, even after you're gone.
Plenty of time to do research.
You hear that, Kyle?
Forward to it.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the wastewater treatment plant study. Kyle, or Carter.
Thank you, sir. This is a part two, if you will, of this conversation that we dipped our toe into in the last pre-meeting, if I remember correctly, wherein we would like to move forward earlier than originally anticipated with this facility study. And so our hope is that you will consider this request and allow us to move forward with regard to this critical analysis so that we can start putting together a more informed and knowledge-based facility approach as it relates to capital improvements we need to make and upgrades and so on and so forth over the next couple of years. And so our view is that this study is that first step to get that moving as we need. And so for that discussion, I'd like to have Tom and Krista come up and walk us through that a little bit and see what we can do about answering your questions.
Guys.
Yeah, so at the wastewater treatment plant, I guess it's not a big surprise. We've talked about it quite a bit over the last couple of years. And we've got a lot of aging infrastructure. And, within the last 6 months, we've identified problems with the screw pumps. We've replaced the motor control center on the return activated sludge pumps. And so just a lot of problems are popping up there and challenges. And the last time that we did any facility study at the wastewater treatment plant was in 2017, but that was limited to the secondary treatment. Keep in mind, I again presented to the council regarding some of those projects, and we've done some improvements, but this misses all the other treatment on there. We have the screw pumps and the headworks, we have primary clarifiers, and we have the secondary treatment. We have secondary clarifiers, and we have UV disinfection, and over on the sludge side, we got a DAFT, dissolved air flotation thickener, and then I keep forgetting the name of them, digesters. The worst part of a wastewater treatment plant, the digesters. It's the anaerobic treatment of all the sludge and really nasty stuff. And so anyway, we haven't had a plan to look at all of these components. And so as my brother used to beat in my head, plan your work and work your plan. We really think it's important for us to do a facilities plan for the entire facility to try and chart a course. The reason we're asking for this to be pushed up more than the budget session is because we want to complete this study so that next budget year we're prepared to come and make requests for how we chart a course for the improvements that are needed to the wastewater treatment plant, and we try and play ahead of the game instead of being behind the game. And so again, we're asking for $400,000 for a facilities plan. And again, we're going to link this together along with the screw pump replacement, try and select one consultant that does both of those projects together for economy of scale, and again, move this project forward and try and chart a course for the significant improvements that are needed to that aging wastewater treatment plant to keep it operating for the next 40 or 50 years. That, Mr. Mayor, members of council, I'd be glad to address, or Krista, I appreciate Krista's the one that's really behind this and helping me do all this, and we'd be glad to address any questions that you might have.
Any questions for two wonderful individuals? Kyle, do you have something?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious because my understanding is wastewater treatment plant is a city of Casper owned asset. And so does it operate like Metro in the sense that we simply contract out services to the other stakeholders that utilize the treatment plant? I guess, how does that work? Do any of the other stakeholders that take advantage of the asset, are they contributing towards this?
Mayor, Councilor Gamroth, excellent question. I apologize, I'm remiss in not addressing that. So if I'm correct, it's 84%, right? The city of Casper is 84% of the wastewater treatment plant. And everybody else is portion of the bill is determined based on how much wastewater they produce. So we meter that in different locations in flumes. And so when we're doing this $400,000 study, the city of Casper is going to pick up 84% of it. The remaining, because we're going to use this out of the funds that are in the account right now, the other 16% are, Mills, Bar None, Evansville, the county at large, everybody else that pays their portion of that. So in general, if we have, significant improvements out there, the city pays for 84% of those. The other member entities pay for their percentage based upon carrying their share of the costs or the expenses. So unfortunately, they're all different. Metro, regional water, wastewater all have kind of a different formula for how they work, but the wastewater is just basically your pro rata bill based upon your share of the wastewater flows coming into the plant.
Thank you. Further clarification then, sorry, this could be just ignorance on my part. So will this be coming out of the sewer fund? Or?
Mayor, Councilor, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Any others, clarifications, questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Oh, yep, go ahead, Pat.
So, Mr. Mayor, so Tom, I just kind of wondered, do you believe that's built into the rate model for the other subscribing communities, or how in your mind does that play into what's in the fund currently?
Mayor, Councilor, I think I'm going to try and answer this. I'm not 100% sure I understand your question, but right now there's quite a bit of money in this account. How much do we have in that account right now? Yeah, about $10 million. So there's a significant amount of money built up in that account. And that's in the wastewater treatment plant fund. And so in the wastewater treatment plant fund, so it really is not going to impact the bill that goes to other communities. If, for instance, we needed to do, which we do, dramatic improvements, and we needed to go borrow money, then that would change kind of the operating expense of the wastewater treatment plant fund. There would be an additional expense out of there. This is basically $400,000. It's coming out of cash in the account, so it reduces our assets by $400,000. But if we borrowed money, then again there would be effects to liabilities because we'd have that note payable for that long-term loan, and then that would affect the rates. So this will not have an impact on any member entity rates, including the city of Casper, but it will come out of that wastewater treatment plant fund. Again, I would apologize that I told you it was out of the sewer fund. It's really out of the wastewater treatment plant fund, Councilor. So
I appreciate the clarification. I guess now my question is, so does the waste?
Can you hold on 1 second, because Pat was on the docket for asking this question.
I was going to ask a hard one. You could sense it.
Okay, hold on. No, hold on 1 second. Pat, do you have any follow-ups with that? Because Carter does have something he wants to ask.
So I do. So really, Casper residents pay the same rate for sewer as, say, Bar None or unincorporated areas of the county that feed into that. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mayor, Councilor, the wastewater treatment plant fund includes the interceptor sewers and the lift stations that are associated with that, and the wastewater treatment plant. So kind of the backbone infrastructure, if you will, of the core wastewater collection. Now, individual member entities, so including the city of Casper, we have a sewer fund that is responsible for maintaining and operating all the individual smaller sewer lines that tie into these regional interceptor sewers and the pump stations that are associated with that. So each member entity is different depending on how much money they fund for maintaining their sewer. So the sewer bill in Bar None is not equivalent to the sewer bill in Casper, because the town of Bar None will charge a different amount for their collection and maintenance and operation of their sewer system than the city of Casper would charge for the operation of their sewer system. So again, the backbone infrastructure is regional. That's the 201 wastewater treatment plant fund, the individual sewer lines. And believe part of our education with council on this project and on the whole wastewater treatment plant is coming up here in this quarter, I would say. And I want to provide you some mapping so you understand what are these interceptor sewers. The one that comes to mind that maybe all of you remember is the North Platte interceptor sewer, because sewer, just like drainage, follows gravity. So the primary interceptor sewer runs all the way from Paradise Valley, essentially along the North Platte River till it enters the wastewater treatment plant. It's not pumped. It flows all by gravity. And then you have other individual interceptor, the Barnum, Wardwell interceptor sewer, the Mills interceptor, the Evansville interceptor. So you have kind of this, like a tree. The primary branches on the tree are the interceptors, and all the little branches tie into those bigger branches.
Thanks, Mayor. So my question is, and I feel like I should know this by now, my 5th year on council, but so the wastewater treatment fund is treated like our other enterprise fund accounts, correct? Like water, sewer, solid waste. And so I guess I don't recall ever seeing the, I don't recall ever having Pete do our spreadsheets and go through the same exercise with the wastewater treatment fund. And so I guess I'm just curious why it's not something we talk about when we talk about those other enterprise fund accounts. So was just looking for context. And
Mr. Mayor, Counselor, I would say that we are reimbursed for every single expense that we take on at the wastewater treatment plant, similar to what it is that we do with regional water. And so you don't see a regional water type pro forma in a similar fashion that you don't see wastewater treatment plant. But that's not to say that the funds that are generated in wastewater treatment don't have contributions by our outside partners, because they do. And so I would still contend that there is a pro rata share, because those dollars that were generated in the wastewater treatment plant, the fund balance in that fund, were made possible because of the rates that we charge our outside partners for the services that they buy on a wholesale basis through the 201 program. So, so they are participating just indirectly in that those dollars are generated through the fees that we collect from them.
Okay.
Good more.
I don't want to necessarily waste the time of the whole group, but I'm still trying to reconcile in my head, because I understand that clarification. Central Wyoming Regional Water System, though, is not a city asset, right? It's,
correct.
Okay, that governing body owns those assets. We simply buy the water from them, but it sounds
we
like
operate it.
we operate it.
Yeah.
Okay. Wastewater treatment is different, though, in the sense that the city of Casper owns all that, and we act as that governing body that other people purchase their services from. And so I guess that it would make sense to me why we don't talk about Central Wyoming Regional Water System and their kind of pro forma and their financials, because it's not city asset, but I'm still confused why we don't talk about wastewater treatment fund as well, since it is a city asset. Again, maybe nobody else cares. But.
Mayor, Councilor, it's important to realize in the sewer fund, so let's say it takes X million dollars to run the wastewater treatment plant. So 84% of X goes into our sewer fund and shows up as an expense. So that pro forma is kind of rolled up, if you will, for the wastewater treatment plant into the sewer fund pro forma, because those expenses that are associated with the wastewater treatment plant, the interceptors, the pumping, the treatment, all that stuff, 84% of that X number, X dollars, rolls into our sewer pro forma, and then ultimately shows up in the sewer bills and rates that go to every individual based upon a cost per 1,000 gallons of treatment. So it's a downstream fund. It's a fund that is supported by our sewer fund. That's where the revenue side and the expense side comes from: the personnel, the equipment, the electricity, everything that is needed to convey and treat that wastewater.
Matt.
Miss.
Oh, can you give me 1 second, Pat? I got Matt on the docket.
Thank you, Mary. Just a real quick question. Says that just concerning the fund itself, it says this 400,000 will come out of the 2 million that is above its required minimum reserve. So is that, and you said there's a total of 8 or 10 million in the fund. So I assume that the minimum, just because I don't know, the minimum required reserve for the wastewater treatment plant is 8 million. Is that what you're saying there?
Mayor, Councilor, I don't have that committed to memory, to be
Yeah.
brutally honest.
No, that's all right.
But yeah, there's a minimum required reserve that we need to have
Right.
on hand, and we have more than that available. Now, we have hit that fund fairly hard because we were doing improvements to the secondary treatment, and there's a significant amount of expenditure that we've had on those, even though we had some grant funds for those projects. So we have tapped that fund fairly hard already. So.
Yeah, no, I just
Matt, I think Carter said he could answer a little bit of that too for you.
Well, if you recall, when we, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilor, when we had the conversation back in December about the rates and the need to establish a modicum of rate increases for the next 2 years, we also talked about establishing the green line, if you will, as sort of our target line pertaining to capital that we need to plan for through the out years. The sewer fund was a big discussion in that regard, not only because we are anticipating some significant lifts through that fund to deal with capital issues at wastewater, but also because there is a surplus of funding in there that we need to leverage in order to get the larger scope of facility repairs and line repairs that we need to do over the next several years. There is a margin in there. And when we say over and above the required amount, that amount is tantamount to about 90 days of operating reserves plus a depreciation amount that we set aside in addition to that. So maybe what it would help to do would be to dust off those charts from back in December, bring them back into this group again and have a little bit of a refresher. I can tell you that the $400,000 that we're asking for to be spent ahead of time will not impact this fund, will not require rate increases to make happen, and will not take us off our goals in terms of trying to deal with the capital needs and the leveraging opportunities that we're hoping to promote with you over the next couple of years. But be that as it may, we would love to come back, sort of go through a primer as it relates to those charts that you were referencing, and establish with you, particularly since we're a new council, if you will, some of the basic elements of this fund as well as the others. I would say that if we are quoting you a number in terms of the total fund balance of the sewer fund, we'll be darn sure to clarify that when we bring those charts back out to you in a week or two.
You can follow up or anything.
Okay, no, yeah, thank you.
You get Pat and I'll get you, Kyle. Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Carter and Tom, for those clarifiers. I guess baseline to me is, first off, do you feel like, bar none, the corresponding communities are paying their fair share? I get it that it's 16% that they pay in, but is that at a higher premium, or, in theory, is it $10 per 1,000 gallon or whatever that rate model is? Or is it the same as Casper? And then lastly, which probably isn't the same, but if Casper was to pass an ordinance around stormwater, would that go into the stormwater as an enterprise fund, go into the wastewater fund, or would that be a separate fund?
So Mayor, Councilor, in response to your first question, everybody is billed from the wastewater treatment plant based upon how many gallons of wastewater they produce. So that's metered. So everybody pays just like the regional water bill the same dollar amount per 1,000 gallons. It's just not billed as a rate. It's not $3 per 1,000 gallons. We just divvy up the expense based upon over the period of the year, how much wastewater did you produce versus Mills versus Evansville versus everybody. And that number has been fairly flat for as many years as I've followed it. And that's been right in this 84%. So which means 16% is all the other people. And that's frankly fairly consistent with population. In regards to your second question, if there ever was a stormwater utility developed, it would be a standalone utility and enterprise. It would not directly flow into wastewater and would only be utilized for stormwater improvements within the city of Casper, not a regional stormwater utility. I've never heard anybody anticipate or think of a stormwater utility that would be more regional. To me, that would be just a component when we've looked at it before that would be only for the city of Casper.
Carter, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, one more thing that I would add to Mr. Brower's comments, Councilor Sweeney, if you don't mind, is sometimes we get a little tempted by the notion of conflating what it is that we do on a regional basis throughout the variety of regional partnerships that we have. And when people come directly to the city and want to buy city services when they're just outside of our borders. In that circumstance, where they're buying directly from the city, sewer and water or whatever the case may be, we do charge a premium rate for those individuals that are just outside the limits of the city and buying services from us, if we can't, for whatever reason, annex at that time. So I think that's a 1.5 premium, if you will, and that's a distinctly different way of doing business than what we do with our regional partners through all the regional service provision agreements that we have.
Do you have any follow-ups for that, Pat, from Tom and Carter?
No, that's great. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Pat. Any other questions or clarifications from any of our staff? Okay, so
Question for,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm hopeful that we're able to approve this tonight without waiting to see the charts in a couple of weeks. That'd be my recommendation if we can, unless there's, to me, they seem a little bit separate. Like we need this regardless of what we learn in a couple of weeks. So
would you be
I'm just
amenable
checking
to that
sure was
recommendation?
Oh, absolutely. I hope we could go in that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amber. That was. Oh, did you have something? I think I just remember.
And I'm probably just gonna, I'm sure everyone else is ready to move on. I'll grab Carter after the meeting and explain it. I'm still just trying to, no, we're ready to move on.
Okay. So I know that was information, but do you need us to kind of give direction to just move forward?
I would like that.
We'll have thumbs up to do that.
Mayor. Yeah.
Is everybody okay with moving forward this direction?
Okay.
And then we'll look at the documentation.
Absolutely.
To kind of align it all.
Yep. Be happy to.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yep. Everybody. All right. Thank you.
I
Appreciate
don't
it.
know if you can see my thumbs up on the screen.
Those cute little bumps.
They're just like little tiny hands, Pat.
I know, but
It's really hard to see sometimes. Carter has to keep saying you're on. But I see your thumb, yes. All right. Budget amendment number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilors, we have the opportunity to discuss the second budget amendment in order to reconcile some directives of the council, some changes in what we thought we would need to do back in May last year for this point of the year, and continue moving forward in an authorized, appropriate fashion in regards to all those circumstances. This is typically the time we come forward with a second amendment. We generally go through 3 throughout any given fiscal year. You'll note that we still have a lot of carry forward kinds of things that we're doing, as well as trying to manage some of the newer needs and requests as we go through. Tonight being one of those, that $400,000 would be included in the second amendment, pending, of course, your approval of the amendment. in its entirety. One of the things, though, that I need you to keep your eye on with us is with regard to the potential impact that the very, very recent slate of executive orders that have come out from Washington pertaining to federal funding. We rely heavily on federal funding in a number of our operations throughout the organization. I would say the epicenter of our use of federal funding is probably transit. You know that we've got a big sharing relationship of expenses with transit. And so from that standpoint alone, we've got a big task ahead of us to try to determine what that's going to look like. And at this point in time, I don't know what that answer is. I've been really fortunate to be able to get some fairly continuous communication with Representative Hageman's office to help us navigate all this. We've gotten some other direction as it relates to some of our other pockets of federal funding, the fire department being one of those that we're working through as well. So the upshot of what I'm trying to tell you is here, while we are asking you for your adoption of the Second Amendment, we may need an interim amendment to help us adjust to what it is that federal direction ends up being pursuant to these executive orders before Amendment 3, which is generally around June timeframe, as you recall. So please be aware of that, a very unique dynamic that we're trying to navigate right now as we speak, which may be, may require us to come back to you for sort of an interim amendment. Having said that, however, if I could turn the time over to Pete to walk us through what we have on the slate for Budget Amendment 2, please feel free to ask questions of these items tonight as well, in that we hope to be able to pass the Second Amendment here very soon. Hello, Pete.
Hello, Mayor.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you, Council, very much. Back. Two. It is, as the city manager mentioned, typical for us to have 3 budget amendments, and it is usually the case that budget amendment number 2 is the tiny one, where we do some minor corrections as the year goes on, maybe accept a few grants, usually relatively small things. In this particular case, budget amendment number 2 is much larger than it would typically be, primarily because of the recent passage of specific purpose items. Voters authorized 4 different projects through that process, and we're budgeting 3 of them for this amendment, totaling $16.7 million. So that's something we have to take into account, and that is certainly the largest part of this amendment. Another very large change is a $5.7 million grant we got from the Running Water Development Commission, which is helping to fund the $1 million reservoir, which is located in the south part of Casper, used to distribute water throughout the city. Certainly, there are many other things in this amendment. We have a total of, I would describe it as 54 items. 55 now that we got the wastewater treatment plant design study authorized. Other things that are on the list include things like $1 million of TAP grant for the bridge, have $600,000 decrease in expenses from the Delta Fund, Safer grant for the fire department for the firefighters. We have the cops grant, police department for the police officers. Other relatively small grants for things like DUI enforcement and non-DUI enforcement. We have a $600,000 ARPA grant for work at the wastewater treatment plant for the current rehab phase 2 phase. Long story short, there's quite a few moving parts to this amendment. Most of them are things that just come up throughout the year, but certainly the 4 big ones are the ones that are leading the way, and they're accounting for roughly 90% of this amendment are the 3 specific purpose tax amendments, plus the one $5.7 million grant from the wastewater, from the Water Development Commission.
What did I miss?
Time for questions.
Oh, perfect.
Perfect
Could you go over
timing.
that again, Pete?
I was in a restaurant. Please don't.
Everybody's okay with that, right? Go ahead.
Thanks. My question is about the timing of the cash flow of the specific purpose tax. So my understanding then, if we're making this budget amendment now, is that we would be able to begin to some extent all the projects that we're budgeting for here. I'm wondering how that timing works. That would be by sometime in June, right? June 30 or how many days are in June, right? So what are we anticipating being able to start to put all those projects together?
Thank you, Councilor Pollock. That is certainly was a point of some discussion in the finance department for exactly how to manage the budgeting for these, because yes, you are correct. We will be collecting that funding over a 2-year period. And at the same time, we need to start those projects as soon as possible. And certainly that was council's intent to get these projects going at a rapid speed. So we are, for the sake of fund balance, we're budgeting the entire amount of revenue and the entire amount of expense for those 3 projects that we are budgeting now. But it is absolutely correct. We will not collect the entire $16.7 million in the current fiscal year. We begin collecting that this fiscal year at the latter half. We'll start collecting it in, vendors will start paying it in April. We'll start to collect it as the Department of Revenue starts feeding it back to us. But you're absolutely right. We won't have the entire $60 million on hand at this time, but we will eventually collect it as time goes on. So by putting it into the budget now, we start to have expenditure authority, so we can start to enter into those contracts for construction and design for some of those facilities.
Thanks. So I can anticipate then subsequent budget amendments until we finally balance all this out.
Inevitably,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Thank you, Councilor Paul. Yes, it's certainly budget amendment number 1 next year will inevitably involve a lot of rolling over for some of those projects. It should be pretty difficult for us.
Sure, thanks.
Any other questions for Pete or Carter? All right. Forward for approval here. Please. Everybody's okay with moving forward with the budget amendment 2? Thanks, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, getting close to wrapping up here. Agenda review for next week, regular meeting and beyond.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you can see on your grid document, this is the opportunity for council to give staff direction as it relates to meetings that we see on the horizon and meeting topics that we are trying to docket. So not only should you be looking at the spreadsheet pertaining to the scheduling of the next few meetings, but also the back page entitled Future Agenda Items, wherein we try to provide some outlook for items that kind of carry over and things that we ultimately need to get your guidance on. If you see things that are missing or are wondering about specific items that you have an interest in, this would be a great time to bring those elements up. As for our February 4th meeting, which is Tuesday, of course, you can see what it is that we anticipate coming forward in your packet this coming weekend. You can see we got a couple of topics we want to talk to you about in pre-meeting, as well as throughout the body of the meeting. I would say you should also anticipate some discussion in executive session as well. We will be bumping up against the special work session that we have. And as you know, that is for the purpose of doing some strategic planning with an orientation towards priority-based budgeting, which you've probably heard way too much about by now. We also have another work session on the 25th and a couple items already scheduled for that discussion at the end of the month. Beyond that, Mr. Mayor, that would conclude my comments, and I'd stand for any questions.
Okay. Any questions about the agenda next week? Anything in the future? I know we can go around the table here in a minute. If you have any suggestions of what you want on the grid for upcoming work sessions, I know I have one that I want to bring up. I'll wait till around the table. Okay. Sounds good. Is that it from you, Carter, for that?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and go around the table. Let's start with Amber.
Okay, thank you very much. Was out last week on vacation, thanks to Councilor Larson for being my proxy at Regional Water. So hopefully one of the other folks who were there will give you an update on that meeting. I was down at the governor's conference on hospitality and tourism for the last couple of days. Wyoming Office of Tourism and many of the destination marketing organizations from around the state were there. It was a great conference, lots of educational sessions, and then also just advocacy for the tourism industry and its impact on our state as the second largest industry and a major employer. So it was great to get together with those folks, and we did spend a little bit of time. We hosted a legislative reception, so we had a number of our Natrona County legislators attend and join us to talk about tourism and why it's important in our community. So really appreciate all the folks who were there, and I was able to talk to most of them, I think, but got a few reach outs to do for people I saw across the room but wasn't able to get to. Yeah, overall it's a great day at the Capitol and down at our beloved Little America for most of the session. So it's really glad to have the opportunity to be there and then zip back to be with you all tonight. I don't have many meetings this week, so I won't. I don't have any of those scheduled. So not much for you next week, but thanks. Yep.
Yeah, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
Michael.
Just a couple things. I did participate in the point in time count for our homeless unhoused folks last week for a couple hours. I was down at the Salvation Army building. That was very eye-opening, very interesting. A couple of things about the good work that the Salvation Army is doing. I wasn't aware that they had a food pantry as well, but they are quite a hub for services. I was down there with Tom, and Eric was down there, and Liz Becker was there as well. So good turnout. It's very interesting to just visit with some of the individuals, and we had a survey to kind of fill out with them, and just beyond that survey, just interesting to talk to them and hear their stories and kind of what led them to this point and what how they're dealing with it. I was unable to attend the senior board meeting yesterday. I had a scheduling conflict, but I did call and visit with there is a new executive director at the senior center by the name of Rachel Brown. She's been with the center for a while, so she's not new to the center. She was the administrative person there for quite some time, so she's very familiar with the operation. And also a new chairperson, Bob Carpenter, is the new president of the board, the senior center. Linda Blackstone, as many of you may know, she's with the senior district now. And so I was just busy with Rachel a little bit about I was just curious about how that interplay would happen in terms of between the senior district board that was approved by the voters in November and the senior center. And she said, basically it's that funding mechanism that the state, and basically they administer, I can't remember how much money, but it's the three funding entities would be that could apply for funding rather, would be Meals on Wheels, the senior center, and Wyoming Senior Services, I believe it's called. Yeah. So those three providers would be eligible to apply for funding through the senior district. So, and that's access to state money. I'll attend the Homeless Coalition meeting tomorrow. I have I was going to ask Fleur, but I have on my calendar court liaison meeting for February 10th. I don't know if Eric, if you track those or not, but no, I'll check with Fleur. But that's our quarterly. We went to quarterly now. Quarterly court liaison meetings there. So Eric graciously provided us some kind of guidelines to kind of help clarify our work with that court liaison. So hopefully that will get better and better in terms of what we provide you all. And to provide in terms of support for the judges. And then last of all, there is a Chinese New Year event going on Wednesday at the Nicholas and from 5 to 7. So take your families and family. That's all I have. Appreciate it. Thank you. Pat.
Thank you, Mayor. So I really don't have anything in particular.
You got dressed up for round table, I see.
Well, I've got to head to a banquet, so I was hoping you. So the tourism folks, the gala is tonight. So yeah, no more red shirt. So anyway, I just wanted on the senior district, the collection is about 1.7 million per year. However, the only comment I've really got is with all the property relief bills. And I was on another call this afternoon on the drive down. I don't think the legislators understand what that cut is going, property tax cut with even with backfills is going to do to our special districts. And I mean, across the board, across the state, it's significant. And I was on with the Hospital Association in particular. They're very concerned, along with some of the other cuts that President Trump announced on Medicaid, and some of those services are at a stall. Thankfully, they found a judge to put a stay on part of that. But I think it's all going to row. If we get, the city gets defunded, you know, what that could mean to our citizens, let alone the special districts that absolutely, you know, are on top of that. So that's all I've really got tonight, Mayor. So
enjoy your gala tonight, Pat. Thank you for being on video.
thank you. And Wham was well worth the time. Thank you to Carter and Fleur for putting some of those side meetings together. I thought they were invaluable. So
thanks, Pat. Take care. Jenna.
Well, the OYD board was postponed, the meeting from Monday, the other day, till next Monday. So I have a insight on that. And then I also have a CNFR meeting at that same time. So I'm gonna have to run from one to the other. Otherwise, that's it. That's all I got.
Randy, do you have anything?
So I met with the collective actually earlier this week. I think I might have accidentally self-appointed myself to it. I don't know if we actually have a liaison there, but I keep getting invited. So hey, I did that. But they obviously summed up everything, so I have nothing to add to that. I had a quick meeting regarding priority-based budgeting. I guess we're all getting phone calls, so that's fun. And prepared for our strategic planning, I think is what we're starting there. I attended the Youth Ordinance Task Force. I think it's a policy task force with Millstown and Evansville. It's in the baby steps, so we're talking about things that each of our municipalities can do to make our ordinances match for truancy and curfew and park times and such. Baby stepping it, and it looks like there are a few bills in the legislature right now that might affect truancy, so all of that I think is, we're in discussioning and no proposals yet, so I don't really have anything to bring you other than wait and see how that goes. And then we'll, when we meet again, I think we meet next month, so then maybe we'll start with ideas that I can give you guys anything of substance. And I don't know anything about the court liaisons meeting, so if there is one, please tell me. And finally, I have finance committee this week, so I did some. It's been a minute
Great
since I got
report,
to put
great
a whole
report.
bunch of
Nice
things
work.
together. Well done. I did a bunch of things and I have nothing to tell you about them. Next time, guys, I promise.
Kyle.
As was mentioned, we had the Wyoming Association of Municipalities Conference Wednesday through Friday of last week. I also want to thank Carter, Floor, Jackie, any other city staff that were involved with the preparation and organization of our activities. It was, like Pat said, a very productive use of time. We got to chat with our colleagues on Cheyenne City Council about shared issues and solutions. I always love connecting with them because they're a very comparable city to us, one of the few. We were able to connect with legislators and lobby on behalf of the city. Again, as Pat mentioned, they're deliberating a host of bills that would have pretty significant impact on the way that we manage the city and how our budget, conversations will look here in a couple months. And there was some really great programming. So I also want to thank Justin, Erla, and Ashley at WHAM for their role. They put on a really good event. Ashley is crushing it as our new executive director, and just feel like she really showed that at this most recent conference. Eric Lindemood is a local who runs Payrock Financial. He had me as a guest again on his Wyoming Business Spotlight podcast recorded at the chamber. He just published that today, I think. So I shared it to my council Facebook page for anyone that wants to listen to me yap as if you don't get enough of it at our meetings. We did a deep dive on issues like 6 cent, pro and cons of social media use for elected officials, priority-based budgeting, and some other stuff that we've been chatting about recently. So might encourage you to give that a listen if it interests you. And then, yeah, I'm glad to hear and unsurprised to hear that city is, responding quickly to some of the executive orders that we saw passed today. So I imagine, I expect to get updates from y'all. I imagine you'll be following it closer than I am. So I'll be interested to get those updates from you and see how that progresses. That's all I got.
Thanks, Kyle. Vice Mayor.
Yeah, again, WHAM was fantastic. I learned a lot, got to do a fantastic tour of the Capitol, which was kind of cool to see all of the restoration that they did. Learn a lot about the history of the Capitol. We even got to go up and sign our names on the dome, so that was pretty cool. While I was there, I attended a suicide prevention group that, and they have free suicide prevention training that is available to us in Natrona County. So maybe sometime we could discuss that in one of our work sessions as to who we could invite to do some of that training. It was a new, interesting take on suicide prevention. It was very worthwhile. I really enjoyed, and the presenter was fantastic, very knowledgeable on the suicide prevention. So I learned a lot of things there.
Is that Department of Health, Mike?
No, it's a private consultant that is offering it for free to all across the state. And there's a lot of other similar trainings available as well if there's one that might fit us better. But I thought that one was fantastic, so I got her information. And the priority-based budgeting conversation was kind of fun to do. Those of you that did that, and then just an additional shout out to Eric Lindemood. He does a fantastic job with those podcasts that he does. They're always fun.
Plenty of other great episodes that don't include me. So
right?
I
Yeah.
encourage you to check them out.
We put up with the ones that include you too, those. So that's all I got.
Thank you so much. Not to belabor it, YM was great. I was only there for too long, but I was there enough to meet with legislators, go on the tour, had some meaningful conversations with a couple of our state legislators, which was good. It was great to hang out and spend some time with council members and Carter and Fleur. I think we tend to forget that we're human and that we are trying to just do the best that we can, and that it was nice. It was nice to hang out and do that kind of stuff as well. And while trying to advance an agenda that is beneficial to the city of Casper and the state of Wyoming. So that was great. And thank you to Fleur and you and Jackie for setting up all the stuff for us to be able to do that. So my meetings, I'm quite full this week. I've got the Casper Utilities Board meeting tomorrow morning at 7. Does it meet here, Carter? This is my first, I didn't see it in my calendar where it's at. Okay, I'll find out. I'll see if I can find out. Finance Committee Thursday at 1. I'll be there for that. I know you're excited.
Me too. Yeah, where's that one gonna be?
Oh,
Same question.
Finance committee will be here, yeah.
Here.
We'll do it upstairs.
In your office, in the area.
Meeting room.
Yep, okay. And then Police Building Task Force on Friday at 11. So I have those three, and so I'll have some reports back to you on those areas as well as other council members that are on that task force as well for updates on that sense. So that's all I've got. And so next week, regular meeting.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'll be doing my PPB tomorrow, so I'm looking forward to doing that as well.
Brace
really
yourself,
fun.
there's so many questions.
Oh, but it was fun. I enjoyed it.
I was
Be
surprised I
ready
knew
to
the
have
answers to most of
Opinions?
Opinions.
them.
Not very opinionated.
That is not an option.
Doesn't
Tried
get it.
that. I tried that.
Hopefully this will be able to help, prepare us as we kind of move into our budget session.
That's exactly what,
Being able to-
that's exactly right.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everybody